My face was on it, sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Was
Turn the other mic down if you
Yeah,
can.
it's got like sound in the background. That one's off and that one's
You
off.
might want to use the corded one. Just go for the
Can we
corded
use
one.
this one?
Yeah.
Can I
it'll
take
work
it out of
better.
that?
Yeah.
No, it has to stay in there. You have to pick it up like a rock star.
Like this?
Yeah. It's got a little bit of walkway.
Yes, awesome. I cannot just stay still. That's just not who I am. Hey, I'm Melissa.
Hey, Melissa.
I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who's in recovery and struggles with anxiety, bitterness, and control. I have victories in codependency, self-righteousness, and self-worth because through Jesus, I am not a victim, I'm an overcomer.
Yeah.
Come on now. Come on now.
I was an only child of parents who waited until after college to have me. They had prayed for a little red-headed girl. Years later, I learned my mom had had an affair and my dad wondered if I was his at first. I remember Mom and Dad fighting a lot. When I was about 8, my mom began going in and out of mental illness places. I remember going to visit her and hearing about shock treatments and seeing the bruises on her arms where they had strapped her down. I remember her tongue swelling and them having to take her away while we were visiting. At the time, it seemed so harsh and cruel, but I suppose they were doing the best they could to care for mental illness back then. Finally, my dad had had enough and divorced her while she was in the mental hospital seeking help. The diagnosis bipolar was not around then, and she was labeled manic depressive and schizophrenic. They asked me who I wanted to live with, and that choice was easy. I was a daddy's girl. We lived in a small West Texas town, and at an early age, I knew I didn't like change. Choosing to live with Dad also meant not changing schools, friends, churches, etc. Mom was going to be living an hour away. My dad and I were inseparable. We went to church, minor league baseball games, fishing, hunting, etc. together. My grandparents stepped in a lot in my life at this point as well. I learned to sew and paint. Strangely enough, though, I never learned to cook. Although I tried my best, I was proud of being able to make spaghetti and the best grilled cheese sandwiches ever as a young woman. Dad started dating again when I was about 10 and took me with him. He stopped going to church after they were being mean to him about the divorce. I remember sleeping on the couch at my soon-to-be stepmom's house, even on school nights. I could hear them have sex, something I had never heard before. Within 6 weeks, they were married. She and her son had moved into our house. This other woman took over. I wasn't allowed in the kitchen, had to ask before eating anything, had 10 p.m. suppers, and never saw my dad anymore. About this time, I was going to church still with my dad's parents and was scared of hell. I walked the aisle and was baptized. Soon after I stopped going to church, I found myself with new friends in middle school. I was tired of being a good girl that was not getting me any attention at home. I had friends who were sexually active, hung out with older boys, had friends who drank and smoked. One of my best friends in middle school had had several abortions. Her mom was even cheating on her dad with one of her older boyfriends. Lots of sin was around me. It was comfortable there. We were making memories and enjoying life. Still being a good girl, I thought. I wasn't drinking, smoking, doing the drugs, nor having sex, just watching it all around me. I often say I was raising myself during these years in middle school because I don't remember many rules or boundaries at home. I wasn't the most popular, but I had my crowd of friends. I sang in the choir and was in honors classes. From the time I remember, I was involved in organized recreational sports, then on to school sports. When I was younger, before Dad remarried, and a little bit after, but not long, he would come to my events, sports and choir. I remember lying about how good I was at these things, trying to get attention and recognition. In the 9th grade, I started dating a senior boy with a red Camaro. What were my parents thinking? I had told myself that I would never have sex until I was in love. If I was in love, then I wouldn't be breaking God's word, right? Wrong. If I would have known all the drama I was about to endure. After 6 months, my boyfriend kept playing the song More Than Words by Extreme and pressuring me to have sex. He convinced me that if I really loved him like I said I would give myself to him. Around this time, my dad and stepbrother started sharing pornography. I remember my parents giving him condoms, and I felt like they expected him to be having sex. They began giving me a Chippendale stripper calendar each year at Christmas. Naked men all over my walls. What were they thinking? My boyfriend left that summer after he graduated from Air Force basic training, and my brother's friends started hanging out at the house a lot. They would bring beer and weed into the house constantly. We were latchkey kids, in case you couldn't tell. It was like a party at our end of the house every weekend and break from school. I still wasn't being bad, I thought, never partaking in the drugs or alcohol. My parents' room was way on the other side of the house, and they were so into each other that they had no clue what was going on our side of the house. My stepbrother would play his metal music at all hours of the night, and I got no relief. I wanted to sleep and do well in school. Why wasn't anyone helping me? I broke up with my boyfriend who had left for the Air Force and started dating another boy, who was my stepbrother's friend. So you guessed it, he was at the house, always. After 6 months and a day, I had waited longer this time, I told myself, we had sex. I told myself this was the beginning of a beautiful love story. He played sports as well, and we convinced my parents that the 10-minute drive from his house to ours every Friday night after the football games was too much. So every Friday, I started staying at his house. Again, what were they thinking? We got pregnant. Imagine that. I remember being so happy, and everyone was so sad. I couldn't understand why. Our beautiful oldest daughter was born in October of our senior year. My high school sweetheart struggled with alcohol, and we constantly fought over him choosing to spend time with his friends over me. We decided we didn't want to be the young and dumb couple, so we got married. That way we could stay together forever. What were we thinking? We graduated and I started college. After his second DUI, he joined the Army by court order. I was constantly hoping he would be fixed by circumstances. The Army would surely fix him for us. As a last effort to save my marriage, I decided to move to North Carolina and give up a scholarship I had received for college. About this same time, my biological mother was ending her second marriage, and so was my father. I was angry at my father because my stepmother and I had become really close after the birth of my oldest daughter. And my dad was leaving her for a woman he met online in Canada. I was ready to focus on my family and get away from it all. We came to North Carolina when my oldest daughter was 3, and everything was supposed to be like I wanted. Surprise, surprise. It was not even close. I was working several jobs at a time, going to college, and trying to help my family recover from every bad decision my husband was making. At the same time, hoping every life circumstance would be an opportunity for him to be fixed. I remember feeling like I was drowning in sin. It was all around me, and I was beginning to lose my battle with it. I was not happy, often felt lonely, and was looking for attention everywhere. I remember my last Valentine's Day with him very vividly. I wanted to go out to eat, and he was chilling on his recliner watching TV. When I finally convinced him to get up and go to town, it was like 7 p.m. There were 2-hour waiting lines everywhere, but I helped. I wanted to eat at Olive Garden, my favorite restaurant at the time, so I ordered spaghetti. Don't ever order spaghetti at a pancake place. It tasted like it had been cooked in dirty soap water. I desperately wanted my husband to say something to the waiter, to stand up for me, to fight for me, but he wouldn't. Then we got home, I put our daughter to bed, and he said he was going out with friends. This was the beginning to our end. I remember being disgusted at his touch and nauseous at his smell after this. I felt like it was my duty to wake him up for work, keep the house in order, pay the bills, and get an education. One memorable night, he had come home and was drunk on a work night. He got up the next morning and was running late for work. He was texting his commander, or whatever it's called, his boss, and rear-ended someone. He called me to come up to the accident. When I got our daughter up, who was 4 at the time, and went up there, the MP, that's the military police, came over to the car and said, "I don't know what time you all quit drinking, but he's still drunk." I was appalled. How dare he think I was drinking? I was in college to be a high school teacher, and I was not drinking. What if others thought the same thing? How dare they? This drinking problem was his, not mine, and I was done with it. That summer, I gave up. I left my husband of 5 years marriage, That summer, I give up. Left my husband after 5 years of marriage, 8 years total together, and filed for divorce. He needed to get his life together, and my oldest daughter and I were on to live a better life. I knew I needed church, and the hunt was on. God led us to Aaron Lake Baptist Church in the summer of 2002 in North Carolina. It's funny now to point out that at this point in my life, I was driving a car that my first husband had wrecked on the passenger side. If you fast forward from 2002 to 2017, I was driving another car that my second husband wrecked on the passenger side. God pointed this out to me while I was attending a testimony workshop while I was denying codependency. I think God has a sense of humor. I had a goal and I stuck to it. I got a new vehicle in 2018 that no man drives. He has his own. I grew up half Church of Christ and half Baptist. I knew there was a hell in heaven at age 13. I remember walking the aisle, being submerged by baptism, and if anyone asked me, I was going to heaven and knew Jesus. Yeah. I didn't fully understand salvation, baptism, and having a relationship with Jesus until my mid-20s. I rededicated myself at a Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames event at Aaron Lake Baptist Church, and was rebaptized with my second husband and oldest daughter, she was 9 at the time, on Easter morning 2006 at Lake Rim. It was 29 degrees outside. I will never forget that. When my second husband turned away from God in 2010, I really started understanding what a relationship with just me and Jesus looked like. I had been relying on my second husband for my understanding and to be the spiritual leader of our home, like he promised in our vows in 2004. We met at church, waited till we got our marriage certificate to have sex, and I thought I did the relationship all correctly, so it would never end, right? He was my spiritual rock. I attended church faithfully, taught in the youth group with him, sang in the church choir, and was part of an adult Sunday school class. I prayed, loved Christian music, went to a few concerts, read spiritual self-help books, did devotions, etc. In 2009, I met an amazing woman at Crossroads Church. She was so real, and I loved spending time with her. I was really struggling with being friends with women. I disliked women. I had always had more guy friends than girlfriends. I know now why the Lord brought this woman into my life. Unbeknownst to me, she had an addiction to prescription pain meds, and she soon went off to a rehab place in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was determined to be her best friend, to be her encouragement during this time. I was investing in her life and was not going to turn my back on my friend. I wrote her as often as I could and even went to see her. It was the first time my second husband and I had ever gone out of town, stayed in a hotel, and left both our kids overnight. When she got home from rehab, she asked us to come to celebrate recovery with her in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I love church, so I was like, yeah, we'll go, but I'm not in recovery from anything. We hugged everyone, ate some good food, and worshiped to some good music. Then it was off to a small group, where I was only there to support my friends, I kept telling everyone. As I sat in my first A to Z women's group, I was like, whoa, I do that. That too. What? I could relate, but only a little bit. I was fine and not like these people, right? Yes. Galatians 6, 1-3 says, live creatively, friends. If someone falls into sin, forgivingly restore him, saving your critical comments for yourself. You might be needing forgiveness before the day's out. Stoop down and reach out to those who are oppressed. Share their burdens, and so complete Christ's law. Yeah. If you think you're too good for that, you are badly deceived.
Come on now.
Fast forward to 2014. My second husband was in Taiwan with his friend from his single days. He would Skype us once in the morning as I was getting ready for work, his nights, usually before he went to bed or out to the bar with his newfound friends in Taiwan. He would like me to add that he had limited access to Wi-Fi. You see, before he left in August, I told him if he left, I would end up cheating on him. I knew myself, and I couldn't be alone. I was very needy about having a man by my side and in my bed each night. But surely after being married for 10 years, I could handle the separation, right? Wrong. It was 6 weeks after he had left, and I was bragging to some coworkers of how well I was doing. An ex-boyfriend started Facebook messaging me at first. At first, just a friendly, hey, if you need anything while your hubs is away, let me know. He's a firefighter and was always protecting me. We dated back before I met my second husband, when my first husband came back from a deployment overseas. This was a time in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where domestic violence was very high among soldiers returning from war deployments and dealing with their female relationships. The ex-boyfriend always carried a gun and made me feel like he would be my Superman if I ever needed him. I had unfriended him on Facebook, deleted his cell phone number, and pushed him away several times since being married to my second husband. He kept coming back in my life, and I thought, well, if I needed something, he would help. Not to mention the fact that my father-in-law had told me if I needed anything, not to call him. My ex and I were just going to be friends, someone if I needed, right? As with most opposite-sex relationships, I did not intend for this relationship to go places it shouldn't. Plus, I had always been trying to show him Jesus, so why not? After a couple of days of the texting became daily, the how was your day at the end of each evening that I looked forward to. He was always a big flirt like I was, and I eventually started flirting back, trying to convince myself I wasn't going too far. I daydreamed of how life would be if we had been married. Would I be worrying about money, working so much, having more babies, relaxing in his RV, or cleaning up after him, dealing with an overbearing mother-in-law, and living with a man I despised? The latter is what caused us to break up in the first place. Of course, I had rose-colored glasses on and had temporarily forgotten all those negatives. I told my second husband I missed him and needed him to call twice a day. I thought he understood. Why didn't he want to spend time with me? Why didn't anyone want to spend time with me? I had convinced myself that all my girlfriends were busy with their lives and this loneliness was all on me. On Halloween night in 2014, I had football game duty at work. My oldest daughter would go to a party afterward, and my youngest daughter would be going trick-or-treat with a friend and staying the night. I was going home to an empty house and to be alone. I thought, I'll ask my ex if he wants to go to a haunted house. He would pay. He used to pay for everything. There's no way I would pay those high prices to be scared. Well, he had plans too. He was going to a party, but asked if I could pick him up afterwards and drive him home. Me being the savior of the streets against drunk driving, sure, there's no harm in that, right? Wrong again. I picked him up and took him to his house where he invited me in. I would love to say that I said no, didn't go to his house, that my good deed of saving the streets had been done and I was going home. But that's not what happened. I went in and immediately saw clothes laying everywhere. After 10 years, he still hadn't learned to clean up after himself, I thought. His kitchen had been remodeled. How nice, as I felt some jealousy. He asked if I wanted anything to drink, some water would be nice, and we sat on the couch to catch up. We talked about old times, work, old friends, new friends, and his girlfriends. We talked about who was at the party, and then he mentioned this 18-year-old girl that was smoking hot that he was trying to get with. I was like, my oldest just turned 18. And he made a comment that literally made me vomit in my mouth about, so what about her age? She would do her. He made several advances at me where I told him, no, I was happily married. He kept saying we could blame it on him for being drunk, or why didn't I just get drunk so I wouldn't care anymore. I was not letting this man touch me. Finally, I had had enough and I was seeing myself to the door. Nothing had changed. Why was I here? Why did I even flirt with him? Oh my gosh, I had to get out of this and erase this from my life. I just wanted to come home and see my second husband, for him to wrap me in his arms and tell me he loved me. I hardly slept at all, and I just wanted to scrub my house clean and move on with my life. But I was lonely. Could I just keep him at an arm's distance and keep with the flirting text? I loved my second husband. What was wrong with me? I was so thankful God had given me a way out. He could have harmed me. I put myself in a very dangerous position. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no test or temptation that comes your way is beyond the course of what others have had to face. All you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it.
Yes.
I had to tell my husband just how. Well, of course, my oldest knew I had come home in the wee hours of the night and couldn't help but tell Daddy Paul the first thing in his morning Skype that Sunday morning. The good thing about having kids is you can't get away with anything. Before I could even explain, he was angry, not talking to me, flying home, and was leaving me. He said I had committed the unforgivable sin, even though I had not done anything physical. I knew that something was wrong with me. I had to go to the only place I knew to fix me, Celebrate Recovery on Monday nights at Aaron Lake Baptist Church. I went to Bible study on Wednesday and stayed for choir. I knew no matter what happened, Jesus would turn my mess into a message, even if it meant another divorce. I was so excited to start a step study, and in February 2015, I dove right in. I asked my friend and ministry leader, Amy, if there was something I could do to help CR because I knew that would hold me accountable to keep coming back. She started sending me the brochures each week so I could make copies. I knew something was wrong, and I had to work the problem to figure out what was wrong with me to make me feel and act the way I did about attention from men. Soon, Amy asked me to do the announcements, and I loved that responsibility. About this same time is when I first learned of the drug abuse my second husband was partaking in. When my second husband first got to Taiwan, his buddy had called and asked me what he was on because he was having withdrawal symptoms. I had no idea. I did not grow up with drugs or alcohol, not even cigarettes around until I was in the double digits. I mean, my parents sipped on wine coolers while watching Star Trek, but nothing major. That summer of 2015, my husband went to rehab in Wilmington, North Carolina, and that was the beginning of our end. He told me his life will continue to be sobriety from drugs mixed with relapse. So he said our life would be better off without him, and he left in 2017. I offered grace and forgiveness for the stolen money, lies, and dangerous situations he put us in. Without Celebrate Recovery, I would be bitter, angry, and broken. Summer of 2016, I went to my first CR Summit. It was amazing. You guys should all go.
Yeah.
I found my place at CR and learned more about my forever family. I also started learning more about myself. At that summit, Jamie Rich made the comment that I was codependent. How dare he? I thought, I've always been a strong, independent woman. After denying it for a year, I grudgingly took a chip for it in the summer of 2017. God knew what he was doing, because about 2 weeks later, I found myself living with 3 other adults and 3 kids, and I was the only one working. Changes had to be made. Through the tools I learned in step study, I was able to make the changes I needed to regain myself and my boundaries. Romans 8:28 reminds me, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. I knew that leaning on Jesus, talking to him daily, and making him my man was what I needed. Step 1 says, we admitted we are powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, and that our lives had become unmanageable. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. Romans 7:18. This step is what caused my eyes to open and have the most aha moments. The family secrets, the questions asking if I thought loneliness was a choice, and talking about the if-onlys. God has changed a lot of my relationships with others. First himself, because he has become my man crush every Monday. The one who will never leave me, the ultimate provider.
Come on, dear.
My second husband found grace to forgive me for my emotional affair and allowed me to extend God's grace and forgiveness to him for the drug abuse and divorce. I want my daughters to know that I did everything I could to save my second marriage, but you cannot change others. You can only change yourself.
Yes.
I pray that they will be able to learn from the mistakes I have made in my life and make different ones. They both know Jesus, and that is the most important thing.
Amen.
My recovery has brought me to a place where I not only like women, I love them.
Yay.
I go on lunch dates, movie dates, I'm involved with group chats, all with just women. I had in North Carolina, and I'm proud to say I have again in Texas, a circle of women friends that I can call, pray with, cry on their shoulder, vent to, boss around, and even encourage every now and then. My daughters have asked, Mom, why do you go to CR? You're not an addict. I love serving others that will not take advantage of me, and seeing people, especially women, through the power of Jesus Christ, gain victories over their hurts, habits, and hang-ups.
Amen.
I am one of those people for life.
Yeah.
It only took me 39 years to gain that self-worth in myself, to love others as Christ first loved me.
Come on now.
I no longer allow myself to think others are too busy for me. I reach out to plan things instead of waiting to be invited to things. My walk with God has become more routine, more second nature, and a daily necessity.
Yeah.
He brought me and my youngest back to Texas and blessed us more than we could have imagined. In 2009, I married Stephen Watson, my Prince Charming. We grew up to, that's what I said in 2019. Oh, he's always correcting me. Anyway, we grew up together as young'uns, but we had not been close since. I had been praying for a man who was a prayer warrior, protector, pursuer, passionate, who could pick me up, present, has panache, and is paramount to me. Little did I know, God had already written the next chapter, and obeying Him in January 2018, when I felt the nudge to move back home to Big Spring, Texas, was all it took to start living it. We are members of the First Baptist Church in Colorado City, and I'm as involved as they'll allow me to be. Spring of 2021, I felt God nudging me to get back to CR, if not for me, but He. The encouragement I would like to share with newcomers is to dive right into a step study for you. Get up and serve so that you'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
And stop believing in all the cliches like time heals all wounds and God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I have led several Journey Begins and a Journey Continues Women's Step Studies, was a leader of the Women's A to Z small group for 2 years, was a training coach for AOBC CR ministry for a year. And I say to that tricky devil as he rears his head sometimes, as for you, you meant evil for me. But God meant it for good.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Genesis 50:20. I'm still Melissa, and I thank you for letting me share.
Yeah.